Hey there everyone. I'm gonna go ahead, give it a couple of minutes, wait for some people to hop on. If you do hop on and you're now just catching this, please go ahead and shoot me a comment below. Let me know that you're here, that you can hear me, so I'm not just talking to nobody at all. So if you're on and you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up, give me some kind of feedback to let me know that I'm good. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and hide the comment feed for now because if you haven't paid attention to me or watched any of my videos before, I get really distracted by the comment thread. So, anywho, I wanted to talk tonight about my experience doing Ayahuasca and Ibogaine. So I wanted to share this because it's been on my mind for a while. I was just kind of afraid of how to come across and how to say it, and I was a little nervous. So recently, well just yesterday, we watched True Life from MTV, which I didn't even know MTV still made True Life, but we watched True Life, I'm Tripping on Ayahuasca. And I thought it was really, for MTV, they did a pretty good job detailing and sharing the stories of two people who had went through using ayahuasca. But I wanted to share my own story with it, as well as my own story with Ibogaine as well. And I've had a lot of questions and everything, and I figured that this would probably be the easiest route to share my experience without having to regurgitate it all the time. So let me say first and foremost that I don't believe that this is for everybody. Not everybody should be off doing ayahuasca and Ibogaine. I think it takes somebody who is mature about it, somebody who has done their research, who has taken the time to figure out whether this is something that is right for them. So please don't go hunting out ayahuasca and Ibogaine unless you've done your research and you feel confident about it. And also please know that you can always come to me if you have any questions as well. So what I want to share first is my experience with Ibogaine, because that's ultimately what I've done first before I went on to ayahuasca. So Ibogaine, I had learned about this just briefly in passing a while ago, and me being somebody who's interested about the way the human mind works, about addictions, about addictive behaviors, because I very much have an addictive personality, I learned about Iboga or Ibogaine. And so recently, this past year I got into a relationship with Max, and I love Max so much. And I'm so proud of him because about 6 years ago he was in a motorcycle accident. And in that motorcycle accident he ended up hurting his back and he busted up some ribs, and he was prescribed prescription medicine from a doctor that he trusted. Well, it ended up, with good intentions, it ended up just snowballing into an addiction. And that addiction led to a heroin addiction as well. And by the time that I met Max, which is in January, in March, he had been off from heroin. He had done treatment. He went to and did detox down in Florida. And so he put the work in, But what ended up happening was we got into a situation where we were helping his dad with a liver transplant. And it was kind of a toxic environment for Max. And I'm sharing this too, I should also say, I'm sharing this with his approval. I'm not just sharing his stuff without him saying it's okay. But so we ended up taking care of his father down in Florida after a liver transplant, and it ended up being a pretty toxic environment for him. And it led him into old habits of using pills again. So by the time I found this out, by the time I realized what was going on, I decided, all right, we're gonna nip this in the bud. So I did some research. We both reached out to different Ibogaine and Iboga retreat centers down in Mexico, and we looked other places as well, but you can't find places in the US who will do Iboga or Ibogaine because it's illegal. And I have an idea of why it's illegal, but I won't get into that here and now. But so we had to go down to Mexico. So we went down to Mexico to a place called the Oca Center. And not only did I go with Max because I wanted to support him in his journey and I wanted to be sure he made it there okay. But I also did it for myself because, one, I was curious about it, and then two, I also was looking to Iboga and Ibogaine as something that could help me with my anxiety. Because I had a lot of little nervous habits and twitches that I would do throughout the day that took up a large amount of my day. And it was starting to get in the way of my life. So I figured Iboga and Ibogaine could help me with that. So a little bit more about Iboga and Ibogaine. So you might be wondering why we did that for somebody who had a history of pill use and, you know, a history that ended up, you know, turning into an addictive lifestyle. So Iboga or Ibogaine is a plant from Africa, and it's used by the Bwiti tribe in Gabon, Africa. And they have found that it is a really good thing to use if you have an addiction to opioids or an addiction to any kind of actual substance, you know, any pharmaceutical substance. It's really good at helping you to break the patterns with it. And not only that, but it also helps with the withdrawal. Because if anybody has any experience with any of this, then you'll know that one of the reasons why so many people who are on prescription pills have a hard time getting off the pills isn't their willpower. It is because there is something unique in the design of these pills that makes the withdrawal so friggin' hard that you'd much rather keep taking the pills and suffering that way than go through the withdrawal, because it's like, from what I hear, the flu times 1,000. So we had hope that Iboga and Ibogaine could help Max to not have to withdraw, because he was already experienced that kind of stuff by going to treatment and going to detox. So we went there hoping that this could be something that would help. It would put an end to the addictive patterns and also stop or help him from going through a nasty ass withdrawal. So we got there, we went to this really cool place in Mexico. Like I said, it's called the Oca Center. It was this little hacienda in the middle of nowhere. I was a little nervous at first because this guy, Bobby, who is one of the people who owns the Oca Center, he showed up with this girl, and they picked us up, and I was like, I don't know. You know, there's always that kind of that ego that gets in the way, and you're like, I don't know about this. I had that going on. But they picked us up. They ended up being really cool people. It was a really relaxed place. It wasn't sterile, and it wasn't like rigid where there was something to do at every second, and there was no rigidity, if that's a word, behind it, which was cool for me because I am somebody who is very unorganized and I just like to flow with things. And so the center was very cool in that. So we get there, it's really awesome, it's very laid back. There ends up being a nurse there who oversees the entire ceremony of the Ibogaine treatment. So what happens is throughout leading up to the actual flood dose of Ibogaine, they give you Iboga, which is like this root powder that they pour into your palm, and you shoot it back in your mouth, you drink some water, and then through that, what Iboga does for you is it kind of just cuts the chatter in your mind. It lets you calm down, chill out, and you just relax. There's zero anxiety. You are just in the present moment and you feel good. You can still function, you can still move, you can still operate. You know, you are just in a very relaxed state of mind. So they give you the Iboga leading up to the Ibogaine to be sure that you can handle Iboga, you know, for whatever reason. So they want to be sure that you can handle it. So we did well on Iboga, we felt very relaxed. So then it came time for our flood dose. So the flood dose, you are given pills. They're capsules that contain Ibogaine, which is one of the alkaloids in Iboga. So you're given this alkaloid, and what they did was they created this very beautiful ceremony that was reminiscent of what they themselves had experienced when they traveled to Africa in order to do Iboga and Ibogaine themselves. So they've recreated this in Mexico. And So they gave us these pills. They performed this ceremony at night. We were laying on mattresses underneath the stars. We take these pills, and then within about an hour, it starts kicking in. And we're laying on these mattresses. Max is on one, I'm on the other, and we are like couch locked. We cannot get up. We're like, holy shit. It starts to kick in. For me, my experience was really beautiful. My experience was good. I know that some people, their experience can vary. I assume that I had a good experience because I wasn't really fighting any major addiction or anything like that. And my experience, I feel, was also pretty beautiful because I've been doing a lot of personal work on myself, that I've kind of gotten rid of a good amount of my demons, so that my experience wasn't like horrifying. And I'm not saying like people's experience is horrifying, but I'm just, you know, relatively speaking, I had a good experience with it. So essentially, my experience was, you know, I would close my eyes, and then through my third eye, I could see like into this visionary state, this beautiful place. I would liken it to, you know, like heaven or the other, you know, like what happens after you die. And I saw all kinds of really cool things. I saw entities, I saw my future. I had this little spirit guide that is a jester who showed me all of these really cool things that I couldn't ever try to recreate in this lifetime. It, like, visually, what I'm trying to say, and if I even tried to draw it out, wouldn't do it justice, all of the different things that I saw. So like I said, I saw really cool stuff. I got, you know, a clue about what my future is going to look like. I saw visions of my future, and other than that, it was just, like I said, it was a really beautiful experience. Nothing negative, except for, so probably around when the sun starts to rise, they move you into your bedroom where you can lay for the next, like, I don't know, 14 hours, because in total it's a 36-hour trip. And so that's, I want to be sure that I make it clear that you're not doing this kind of stuff recreationally. You're not doing this and doing it over and over and over, and it's not creating an addictive pattern in your life either, because dude, who wants to be doing this for 36 hours? I'm pretty much one and done. I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. But within the last bit of the trip, so after like the bulk of like the experience is over, you're posted up in bed for, you know, 12-ish hours where you're kind of in a trance state. And during that trance state is your time to kind of digest what just happened to you, where you're trying to understand it all and trying to piece it all together. I know that Max, he had like a reoccurring, like during his trip, he was on this loop where he was just thinking about like the same couple of things every now and again. So he had the time then, after we were all laid up in bed, to kind of process that, to process and understand some patterns and things that have happened in his life that have brought him to where he was. So in all honesty, the whole entire experience was really awesome. It was really cool. It was something, like I said, it's one and done. I'm never going to do that again. But it was worth it because I feel that inevitably it helped Max a lot. Now, I will say that after we did this, we traveled around Mexico for another 2-ish weeks. And I think it would have been better and more beneficial had we, after we did Mexico, we went back to Florida. And when we went back to Florida, we went back to his father, which was one of the, you know, his dad and his relationship with his dad can be a large trigger for him. So what I would suggest, if you do anything like this, is that you have a good solid plan for where you're going to return to after you do something like Iboga or Ibogaine, especially if you're not just doing it to be a supportive role, or you're not just doing it to get rid of anxiety or whatever it might be. If you're doing it because you have some kind of deep-seated issues or some patterns of addiction or whatever it might be, when you are done with your Ibogaine experience at, you know, Oka Center, wherever it is you go, please be sure that you have somewhere set up to go and to return to that can be good for you. It can be conducive to your sobriety afterwards. And it's not just you returning to old negative triggers or a community of people who weigh you down or whatever it might be that would have gotten you to where you were before doing Iboga or Ibogaine. Another thing that I really liked too about the experience, especially at Oka Center, was it was like couples therapy for us. It really helped us as well. And then not only that, but we were out in the middle of nowhere for I think 7 days, and internet connection was kind of crappy. So throughout this entire 7 days, we just were able to disconnect and be in the present moment, which made the experience that much better for both of us. So leading from Iboga to Ayahuasca, you know, when we were leaving the Oka Center, which is where we did Ibogaine, they recommended that we do Ayahuasca next. They were like, hey, you're on this great track for growth. Check into Ayahuasca. So we ended up coming back to Florida, and I, through the grapevine, had found places to do Ayahuasca at. And ayahuasca is something as well that it's really going to be hard to find in the United States. You have to find a church that practices it for religious purposes. So I ended up, through the grapevine, I found 2 ceremonies to attend. So the first ceremony I went to, it was really cool. It was led by a shaman. The shaman, for whatever reason, I ended up falling asleep throughout the entire experience. So ayahuasca for my first time really didn't do anything for me. Max, he had an incredible experience. But for me, ayahuasca, the first time I was out cold. So I don't know, I guess sometimes that can happen. Sometimes that's just the card you're dealt. So I was a little discouraged, but I didn't want to give up because I've heard such beautiful things about what ayahuasca can do for you. So I ended up finding, through the grapevine again, another place to do ayahuasca through. So this time, it actually, I had something to write home about with my ayahuasca experience. So, we go to this place, we're sitting in this round circle, there's a ceremony behind it. We set intentions as to, this is my purpose behind wanting to do it. There's people of all shapes, sizes, and ages around us. I mean, there was a mother who was laying down a couple of people from us who was doing ayahuasca. I mean, there was a kid who was probably no more older than 19 years old who was doing it as well. So there was people of all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds who were doing it. So you drink this root. It's a root bark kind of thing. And let me tell you, again, I'm going to reiterate, you don't just do ayahuasca and you're addicted. There's no addiction compound. If you end up being addicted to ayahuasca, you're going to be addicted to eating sand. I don't get that mentality. So there's really no addiction, I feel, to ayahuasca. Because for one, the trips can be pretty friggin' intense, and then 2, it tastes like earth, and it just does not taste good at all. But so you drink this, and you have multiple occasions to drink more in case you don't quite feel it after your first cup. So I drank probably about 3 cups before I felt anything. And I was kind of worried that I wouldn't feel anything because the time before I just passed out. But once it finally started to kick in, there was no doubt it was kicking in. So I ended up going outside around a bonfire, listening to music. I was able to sing along to the music. I was still, when you do these kind of things, there's still cognition about you. You're still able to think, you're still able to talk. There are times when you're in the thick of it, and you might not be able to do any of that as well, but I myself was able to carry on conversation here and there. I was able to sing, I was able to get up and move. It wasn't like I was drunk or anything like that. But ayahuasca was very important for me because ayahuasca felt like years of therapy rolled into one session, one ceremony. You know, I had been doing some therapy leading up to this ayahuasca, and I feel truthfully that I got more out of doing the ayahuasca experience, the ceremony, and drinking it than I had throughout all of the therapy that I had done. So once it started to kick in, I went outside, I sat by a bonfire, and if you've been following my story at all, you know that things are tough between my mom and I. And while I was at the fire, this thought came to me, and it was just, if your mom would have known better, she would have done better. And that was like, that was so critical for me, so crucial in my life, because it helped me to level up with my mom. It helped me to see things from her side and to understand that if my mom was in a better mind frame, if she didn't hurt so much, she probably wouldn't have made me hurt so much either. So that was crucial for me, and that's a realization I never got at all throughout doing some therapy. So it was really cool to actually have that realization come over me. It drove me to tears. I was outside crying. Sorry, I'm not crying right now. I'm just wiping some eye gunk away. But, so that was powerful for me. But then there came a time where I was like, okay, I need to lay down. So I went back inside and I went around the circle where everybody had the option to lay down if they wanted to. And Max was laying down and I laid down next to him. And I put this sarong over top of me. I laid it out over me like a blanket. And there came a point in the trip where I didn't know where my body stopped and the sarong started. Like, the sarong and I were one. It was weird, but it was really cool. I felt this strange, odd connection to everything. Like, everything was one. There was no separation of self from anything else. And then not only that, but that was where I was really in the thick of my trip. Laying there, I would close my eyes and I would see these fractals and these beautiful colors that I can't even describe to you. I can't even describe really the shapes and give the shapes justice for how they looked, but I saw shapes and fractals and colors kind of like moving along. It was beautiful. It was really friggin' cool. So that was a cool experience to it. And then of course I had a lot of self-love, like realizing that, you know, I am good, I'm great as who I am. Like, what the hell am I worried about all this time where I'm always stressing about, you know, like, am I good enough? And, you know, like that high bar that we always put ourselves on, that kind of was eliminated. And I had a lot of self-love going through me and a lot of love for everybody else. And so one of the things that scares people off with ayahuasca is where you get sick. But in ayahuasca, when you're doing the ceremonies and you're drinking it, you know, what they call it instead of getting sick is getting better. So they view you throwing up and you purging as a way that you're cleansing yourself. You're removing the toxins, you're removing ancestral damage and baggage. And they say that when you do something like ayahuasca, you're healing your lineage. You're helping to stop the cycle. Whatever the sick cycle might be in your family, you're helping to eliminate that. Or not necessarily eliminate it, but you're helping to recognize it for what it is, and you're allowed to do something about it. So I was afraid of the whole getting sick thing, because not only can you throw up, but also purging looks like diarrhea as well. So I was afraid to have that happen. But they had buckets, they gave us all buckets, and I had a bucket, and what ended up happening was I had 2 bouts where I threw up, and each session lasted less than a minute. And it was very clean, it wasn't ugly, but basically, you know, like, they say that also when you're throwing up that you can kind of sometimes think of what it is that you're eliminating from your body, the toxicity that you're eliminating. And for me, it wasn't like I thought of it, if this makes any sense, but it's like it came to me. But when I would purge, I would think of ancestral baggage, family damage, you know, years of family trauma. Like those thoughts came to me with each purge. So my experience with ayahuasca as well, I feel was very beautiful. It was something that wasn't really hard. I've heard experiences of people just like feeling like they're about ready to die and they're on their deathbed from doing ayahuasca. But you know, the truth is ayahuasca doesn't last near as long as Ibogaine or Iboga does. It lasts probably 6 hours at most, but really it felt like mine lasted about 4, and probably like the thick of it was maybe 1 to 2 hours. So I feel yet again that I had a pretty beautiful experience with ayahuasca, but I was really open to it, and I've done a lot of work leading up to doing ayahuasca that I feel allowed me to have a good experience. I also want to say too that leading up to doing ayahuasca, you have to follow a diet, because the diet, or dieta they call it, is kind of like a vegetarian meal plan. So their idea behind it is you have to eliminate as many toxins from your body and internal stressors as possible. So if you eat less meat, less fast food, you're not drinking soda or drinking pop, or soda and pop are the same thing, but if you're not drinking beer or whatever it might be, then Mother Aya, the spirit of ayahuasca, is probably going to treat you a lot better than if you just like come in there and you've been eating like shit for the past month. If you've been eating like shit for the past month and you do ayahuasca, you're probably going to have a lot harder of a time with Aya. So that's pretty much it. You know, I want to reiterate again, doing your own research. You know, I don't feel that you should watch this and then be like, all right, I'm sold. You know, go ahead, do your research. I watched Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan talks a lot about ayahuasca and a lot about Iboga. If you want to look on YouTube, his talks with Aubrey Marcus are largely about ayahuasca and Ibogaine. So those will give you another place to reference and to get an idea of whether or not it's good for you. And also, I also really want to get across the idea of, after all of this stuff, you need to integrate whatever it was that you learned, because you're going to learn a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff is going to come out about, like, you know, how you've been living your life, or the things that you've been allowing to distract you from living the life that you're meant to live. And if you just like experience that and then you go back to like sitting in front of the TV, eating like shit, hanging around with the same people who don't really have your best interests or even their best interests at mind, then I feel that all that time, effort, work, and money put into these experiences isn't going to really help at all. You know, I don't feel that these things are cure-alls. You do have to put some work in after you do this in order to have the best experience with it. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go ahead and see if there's any questions. If you guys, you know, have any questions now, feel free to shoot them my way. Hey guys. Yes, Ibogaine does help with addiction. Hi, I'm Virginia. I love you too. Hey, Richard. Thank you, Marcus. Okay. Duly noted, Michael. Yes, I got sick. If you guys didn't catch that, I did get sick with ayahuasca, but it wasn't a big deal. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask. If not, I appreciate you guys for hopping on. I'll give you like 1 minute. And hey, if you want to message me privately and ask me any questions, that's cool too. Alright guys, so it doesn't look like anybody has any questions. Like I said, you can always message me if you do have any. I appreciate you all for hopping on this call. Thanks a lot, and have a great evening and a happy holiday. Bye guys.